every time I've thought about saying this, um, feel like there's a solution. People just shouldn't say the N word, but I think that racial slurs, people hide behind them, thinking that they're avoiding being racist. Whenever, anytime you refer to a group of people as being of some certain attribute, usually something bad, that is racism, or that is a kind of racism. That's identifying people as being a certain way. It depends, rather than saying all Mexicans want us to speak Spanish, or they don't want to speak English. I guess what I should say is that there's some people out there that prefer to have their own language and expect that um, that it's going to be the dominant language whenever English is the dominant language. But maybe we should take on learning Spanish, those who can. Um, it's like speaking in tongues. And um, as Christians, you're supposed to take on the burden of others. And a racial slur might be a burden that you take on, that you refer to each other by those slurs, but in private, you know, to kind of understand what it's like to hear it, and maybe to use it to shock, you know, kind of whenever you use some awful word, you associate it with something good, such as taking on the burden, being indebted to Christ, being a slave to, no longer a slave to sin, but uh, but a slave to righteousness, or I don't know. But the thing is that going into dark places with light might also mean going into places that nobody in the world would ever venture into, to try to solve a problem, resolve a problem, get past the barriers that people see as barriers, and point out the actual problem, you know. Just like when people say, did Jesus walk in the water, rather than say, why did he walk in the water? You know, what was the purpose of that? Was it faith building? Was it, you know, into to see, because there's so many things in our world that are obstacles that we feel that we can't overcome, obstacles that are too high, obstacles that prevent us from going into other places. In video games, there is this obstacle called the KD ratio, and it's a social obstacle. It's your kill to death ratio. How many people did he kill? How many times did he die? And if it's fractional, then the other gamers tend to look down upon you and say, "Well, you got to get good with that gun, because you know you're getting killed more times than you're killing." And the problem with that is that it prevents you from making strategic decisions. And we got a whole group of people, what we call snipers, that spend all their time trying to increase their kills to deaths. And they spend all that time, and they have another skill that they never use, and that is recon, which would benefit the entire group, but they're more concerned about themselves than about the group. And so they never use recon, which would benefit the group. It's improving. They're starting to use the recon more. They used to use a lot of what are called um, recon darts. They use these darts that shoot out and they only last a certain amount of time. They have their uses because the sensor shields that people may use limit the distance on which they can be identified being in a place. So that's the purpose of throwing the darts versus using something called a motion beacon, when the only time you see people that are there is when they come across the beacon. So there's certain purposes for each, but the people who use the darts will not look at the big mini map, which will tell them if there is enemy in the hex, that is the region that you're currently in. We call it a hex because it's got hexagonal border. It's got a hexagonal border, which is pretty common in real-time strategy or strategy games, is using hexagonal borders. And I don't really understand why hexagonal borders are used. I think it's probably easier to identify where the regions are, whereas if you used lines, then some lines might come really close together. It probably makes it easier to compute where the borders are, because then the computer just has to think about the hexagons and then figure out if they're in one hexagon or another. It's probably a good way of partitioning up the map. I know that probably all flew over your head, but people who have played PlanetSide would probably understand that stuff. And so I end up doing, most of the time when I'm in the game, doing a lot of support. I don't usually shoot people. And so my KD ratio is terrible, but I don't care because it always gets in the way of doing strategy, of planning out what to do. It's an obstacle. It's an unreal obstacle. People spend more of their time trying to gain badges of merit, trophies, and things to show to people their significance. But I keep telling people I've Araxium strategy, and when you can't Araxium strategy, you can't. Araxium means that you've exploited it until you've mastered it. And so there is no way in the game to gain that kind of merit. In my own mind, I've mastered it. And some of the things that I do is, whenever we're facing a lot of people at one base, I will say, okay, what we need to do is go over and take these other bases of theirs, so it will distribute and distract them from their primary objective. It'll distribute their numbers across these other bases, or at least the more professional people will go out and take those bases back. And so if you put a lot of pressure, I mean, even if you just have one cloaker in a base and he stays there the whole time and he takes the flag every now and then, there will be 3 or 4 of their number that'll flock to that base, and they'll stay there because this guy just keeps taking the flag. And maybe there's a cloaker in the next base that they try to take that then goes back and takes back the flag. So you could have 2 cloakers. The cloakers are snipers that have the ability to become invincible. And so you have 2 cloakers in each base, and they're keeping a good bit of the enemy there. And so the enemy being the people you're playing against. And in this game, there are 3 sides, 3 factions. Terran, which are called TR, and then you have the New Conglomerate, which are defined as soldiers that get a paycheck, but supposedly they have weekends where they're not working. So those are your more American ones. Then the TR are referred to as commies because they represent a government. And then we're the Vanu, and what we are is we're kind of we've adopted alien technology, and we worship a god named Father Vanu. And so we're kind of the religious spiritual types, and we wear spandex and referred to as being disco dancers. Our Max wears high heels, so we think that he's a transvestite. Max is a robot that is really big and goes out and shoots big guns, and he's much quieter than the other Maxes in the other factions, which make these clunky, chunking sounds because they're made of metal. And I think Garmax is made of probably carbon fiber or something. And I don't usually turn the dialogue on because I don't want to hear all the voices of the characters and what is said while you're taking the base, because it's saying, "Come on, soldier, we're losing this flag," or something like that. But the Vanu characters sound like they've been doing drugs and it's ruined their voice, and so they have these really kind of like, so in I don't like hearing it, so I basically have cut out all the dialogue, and it permits me to hear footsteps so I can tell if somebody is there. And I'll sit there and spot somebody for a long time, and I know that while I'm spotting somebody, I'm saying stuff out, telling them, there's a such and such, there's a such and such, there's a such and such, there's a such and such. And it annoys the crap out of people, but the enemy doesn't like it when you spot their vehicles, because they spend a certain amount of what are called certs to get a capability called stealth. And stealth means you don't show up on the mini map. You don't, and so people don't know you're there. But if you make an effort to spot infantry and the vehicles and the air vehicles, then it helps your team to identify where enemy is, and they gain confidence they're out there getting the enemy. And the tanks will disappear. And if people knew this, if you constantly spot a tank, it's not going to be drawn near you. It's gonna run away because it's afraid that it's going to get spotted, and then some air vehicles, some what are called liberators, will come down and destroy it, or a C4 ferry, which is what we call them, because they fly around and they drop C4, which is explosive, will drop on their tank and explode their tank. And so it is a very, very complex, what I call massively multiplayer online, so MMO, first-person shooter, FPS, real-time strategy, RTS. Real-time strategy is like StarCraft is real-time strategy. First-person shooter means it's kind of like playing Halo or Doom or Battlefield 2142 or whatever it is these days. And the massively multiplayer online means that it's a free game, and there's a lot of people in it playing at the same time. And in this game, the server tries to keep people from collecting too much in one hex, though it's common that when that does happen, the servers will crash if there's way too many people in one region. But you get this feeling that there's this massive war going on, and there are hundreds of people playing. And there's some guys that can collect information on the number of people that are playing in the game. And so they're like, there could be like, on one day, there could be like 240 of the TR, and like 300, or no, actually 240 of the NC, and then like 300 of the TR, and then there will be like 60 or 100 VS. We're always outnumbered, and so we're always losing. And me being on the Vanu side, considering how I tend to get on chat and talk Bible and religion and all sorts of stuff, because I do. It usually happens on Sundays, and I don't really understand the purpose of that, the reason why that happens. A lot of people feel the need to be on the other teams. So I'm basically making the Vanu really kind of worse because I think people are more attracted to the other sides because they don't have to hear me. And I've been banned twice. I've told people that if they ban me again, I'll just come back again. And so you may see that as some really bad behavior, but the way I see it, I'm trying to point out to people that war is never fair. Um, it's annoying. I'm trying to put a stigma on war. Um, that you don't want to go out and be a part of a war because, you know, it's there's really no justification for war anymore. Um, we have nukes. We have the capacity to threat other governments into stopping performing wars. Now we have controlled wars. It doesn't make any sense. You know, nobody's going to use the nukes, but we still got wars. What's the point of that? You know, and pretty soon we're going to be using robots to fight the wars, which is nice, but still, it really doesn't make any sense anymore. And these countries are still going to do it. We got Russia that's wanting to go into Ukraine and beat up on the Ukraine, and Russia is not threatened by Ukraine. The reason why they want the Ukraine is because they see them as a potential territory to acquire. And I see it that Ukraine is not consenting to this, and Putin's essentially raping a country. You know, we should see it as rape because that's what it is. He is raping another country, and the Russian people don't deserve to be starved um, for his actions because we hold back resources. But the thing is that they need to rise up against him just the same way that we tried to rise up against our government. At least these militia that came up and tried to put the fear into the government because there needs to be fear in the government. The government needs to fear us like the governments in other lands fear them, such as in France. And, you know, that's the thing. You need to have respect for the government, but you need them to fear the people. Because if they don't fear the people, they're going to perform all sorts of evil. But you can do peaceful protests. You can show your numbers. You can yell out every day and annoy the crap out of the people that are entering the house. It's freedom of speech. They can't prevent you from doing it. But what if in your freedom of speech you used words that shock? You know, that have or you use ideas that shock, and the officers and the people that are government employees are listening to this stuff. It says in the Bible, to him who has ears, let him hear. Maybe you don't use shocking words. Maybe you just recite Bible verse. You don't have to have a plan on what it is you're going to read. Just reading the Bible itself is effective enough because some of those words are going to hit the right ears and it's going to have a change in their behavior. You just don't question who it's going to hit. You don't know. They could see, it could seem like they're ignoring you, but it's hitting their ears. And they might heckle you, but just keep talking. So the thing is that there are methods to resolve problems that don't involve controlling people. What you what you spend your time doing is influencing, inspiring people. Um, it and rebuking. You need to rebuke, because without rebuke, people won't know they're doing the wrong thing. They won't understand the logic. You need to talk the logic too. Um, I don't believe evangelism should be a paid art because it's given. It's a spiritual gift from the Lord, and so whenever you evangelize, don't treat it like it's something that you made, something that you developed. Think of it as something that's been given to you, and to make money on it is to hold it for ransom. And it says in the Bible to to um, to not hold back good, and that's essentially that. And when Jesus was overthrowing the money changers in the temple, that's just like some Christian author selling his books inside of a church. Don't do that. I mean, don't don't go into the church and then lead some sort of discussion and say you can buy my books outside. Um, a singing chorus that goes inside and is singing, then says their records are outside. Um, you can take donations, but don't require people to pay for the stuff. Don't hold back good. Give people the capacity to take the stuff, because CDs, it costs almost nothing to produce CDs anymore. So why pay? Why um, force people to pay for it? There's something in the Bible that says, "Give to a man what his works are worth," and so you put out a donation box, and people give you donations. Same with the books that are inside the bookstore. You don't charge for the books. It's going to cost a certain amount to produce those books, but think of it as like a tithe, like it's something uh, that you're giving to those people that are maintaining that part. It's a necessary loss. Okay, it costs you. You've lost profit on it, but somehow you gain insight or wisdom, or maybe the resources to produce more. If people find your works worth what you think they're worth, or they're going to determine the price for your works. That's what you need to charge for it. That's what you need to determine whether or not to determine the audience. It's marketing, and you offer it out there. You put it out there, and it's going to define whether or not people are accepting of what you're doing and are inspired or whatever. You know, if it bothers your self confidence to know that, then just put the books out there and don't collect the donations, and offer it for free, and you know do another job. If the books don't sell, tell the churches throw them in the trash or recycle the paper, because for you it's a cathartic thing to write the book and to put it out there. If it benefits someone and you're still this way, which is the way that I am, it's I would probably it makes it's interesting to me that only a few hundred will watch these videos, but there are thousands that watch my singing videos. That that's actually been inspiring to me, but I don't know who those people are, and in my mind, I kind of water it down that maybe it's possibly that my scene isn't really that good, and it's some entity that's throwing make believe people at my site, and somewhere down the road they're going to tell me, we've been sending these robots to your site to increase your likes, and if you're interested we can send more at it for this amount of dollars, because these outfits do exist. And so it just seems a little bit unreal that there's no dislikes but there's 100% likes. And so I don't want I've got ego problems, and so I don't want my ego to be affected by it. I've been affected by this stuff in the past, and I don't want to go on a career of singing. The singing is just something else. It's just something I do. I'm trying to inspire people to listen to music that they probably never heard before, and maybe inspire them to sing. The record industry is pretty much dead. There was a time before records when people made sheet music and people played instruments. Everybody did. Everybody sang. Everybody played instruments. Every home had a piano in it. Um, most homes had pianos in them. It was the thing you did after dinner. People didn't have TV sets. Before their radio, there were people that would play piano in their house, and it was the source of entertainment. A piano in 1900, according to a Sears Roebuck catalog, was about $100. So for $100, you bought a piano and you played it in your house in the 1900s, and maybe you would recite scripture, poems. You would read from a book. Everybody would read from a book, maybe. Maybe you would read the news for that day. Maybe you would read something from a book. Dictionaries didn't really exist much back then. Encyclopedias really weren't there. Um, Maybe you read something like The Land of Oz or something. But the thing is people entertained themselves, and the they took on the burden of trying to learn poems, learn scriptures, learn quotes and things of that nature, and it was ever present in their head, those quotes and things, and it helped them to live their life um, with a richer understanding of what was important and what was not important. These days, we have such things dictated to us on the news and in documentaries and television, and it's the same thing, but we're not involved in how much of it we're involved in reading it, how much of it is influenced by the others, how much is unique. Um, when bands play in certain cities and they rise to popularity, um, is it in that city, or is it across the country? Is it across the world? They have their own listeners. Things have changed. It's not like it is when people were traveling from city to city. We no longer have to travel. In fact, it's practically important for us not to travel unless we're using something that, using like electric car. If we're using a gas powered car, then it's going to it's going to ruin the environment. There are people that would say, there's no such thing as global warming. No, there is. And um, my father said the way you fix the ozone layer is by piping up ozone from down here into the ozone, into the hole in the ozone layer. That would fix the problem, but we can't really do that. Maybe we could, but that's the way you solve the problem. The so, but that's not feasible. So what is the solution? The solution is to stop the um, the spread of that. See, because what we're doing is I guess the carbon dioxide is keeping the light from the sun you know, reflecting on the earth and back. That it doesn't really that it's making the earth hotter, and that's called the greenhouse effect. I took geology, so I know about albedo and things like that. Um, Albedo is the tendency for the surface of the earth to either reflect or absorb the radiation coming from the sun, the light. And radiation, a light is radiation we can see, I think. And there's radiation we can't see that isn't in the spectrum that we can recognize. We can see it. And anyhow, the what I was starting out saying was is that we take on the burden of others. We take on understanding what others understand and not pushing back against it. Because I mean, how much in the Bible would really tell you that what they're saying is wrong? You know, accepting what they have to say is a method of negotiation. It's going to build trust, mutual trust. We don't have that in the world anymore because we see the others in the world as being enemies. We don't understand, and then we are not compelled to really even understand their point of view. The reason why people were pushing for Trump is they believe that since he had his own money, he wouldn't be influenced by the corporations. But in the Bible, and the Christians seem to be ignoring this, it said the love of money is the root of all evil. And if this man, even though he's not controlled by other people's money, if he loves money himself, he's going to be evil. Okay? You just have to look at his fruits. You don't judge people eternally, but you do look at their fruits to determine whether or not you want to be around them. And he has a lot of bad fruits. You can forgive him, that doesn't mean that you can really trust him. Okay? You put somebody in the government and you're not supposed to question them. But that's really just to keep you from them destroying you, and that doesn't happen anymore. That's the old kingdoms, because there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that says, you know, don't don't think little of the there was no government. I mean, there was government, but there were kingdoms most likely back then, and kings would make decisions on a whim, and they didn't have the capacity to destroy the world. Um, they had the capacity to kill off all children under 3, because that's what happened supposedly whenever Jesus was born into the world. That King Herod advised, and if you want to determine whether or not Jesus exists or not, you might check to see if there was a lot of children that died back about the same time to the hands of a king named Herod. And if that happened, and the justification was that there was a king coming into the world and Herod was afraid of him, then that's a big clue that there was a man at the time. So to say that you don't believe there was a man at the time is really saying, I don't want to know if there was a man at the time. I don't want to know if the statistics point to the chance that a man existed back then, that this man had a movement that was pushed. Um, this man was seen as God, but he was like one of us on earth. He had the capacity to use his powers, but he didn't use them for himself, he used them for others. He used them to benefit others, to heal people and do things like that. He wasn't waging war on the world like some other rulers, He wasn't ruling a people. He didn't want to rule. He was different from the way the world religions tend to be. And I don't think Buddha was that way. But Muhammad, you know. So the thing is that he was a non-confrontational, and the worst thing that he probably did that was shocking was overthrowing the tables of the money changers in the temple. But that was an aggression. That was him rebuking. He was rebuking the money changers in the temple because they were not necessarily religious. They were just taking advantage of a opportunity to make money, and they loved money, and they were reducing the stigma of the ritual of taking the life of the animals to pay for the sins. The ritual lost its meaning because people would just repetitively go to the temple, buy their dove, and then take its life to pay for their sins. And how much different is that than somebody in the Catholic Church doing a certain number of Hail Marys, to cover their sin. When it becomes a process, when it becomes a mechanized process, there is a chance for people to lose the connection between the ritual or the tradition and why it's being done. And so then it just becomes a thing that you do to maintain a facade of being aligned with the religion and the beliefs whenever you've pretty much watered it down to just something to keep people from excommunicating you. Keep your family from throwing you out. Somewhere in the Bible it says that you're supposed to love God so much to the point to where you hate the people around you, and really that's just to put an emphasis on how important it is to follow these commandments and to know God. That there are going to be people in your life that are going to come in the way of you pushing forward to pursuing Christ, and that not to let them get in the way. Don't let your children get in the way. Don't let your spouse get in the way. Don't let your family, your extended family, don't let your blood relatives, don't let anything get in the way of pursuing. And so even your own sins, your regrets, anything that distracts you from pursuing is dangerous. And you're supposed to love that more than anything in your life because it's going to change your behavior and your morals and how you treat others. Whereas if family come in the way and keep you from doing that, you're not going to adopt the morals. You're not going to adopt the perspective that God wants you to have. And there are going to be people that are going to listen to this video and says, I don't believe in God. And I say, well, it says in the Bible, it's better to say you don't and then later do, and than to say you do and then later don't. So I'm really talking to the people that are already Christian, already considers themselves to be Christian, or pursuing Jesus and don't believe they can call themselves Christian. That, you know, I'm kind of in that level, is that I can't really call myself Christian. I'm just pursuing I'm trying to incorporate more and more of what's in the scripture, and I'm doing it slowly, and there are things that I'm not doing right that I'm wrestling with God over, and God's a wrestler. Negotiation, you know, he demands righteousness. He doesn't demand sacrifice. He demands righteousness. So what are you don't need to sacrifice. You know, you don't need to sacrifice your children. You don't need to sacrifice your spouse. You don't need to sacrifice people. You don't need to sacrifice animals. You don't need to take the life of an animal to maintain a covenant like before. That's no longer there. Jesus takes that. Jesus was the last sacrifice. And so, because of that, the natural human way of sacrificing something in order to gain something in the unknown is no longer there. The thing you do is you just simply pray, or you just simply keep something on your mind and ponder, and you don't dwell on it, you don't worry about it, you just say, you know, wouldn't it be good, and then just leave it. You know, it's gonna be ever present in your mind, you know, that there's solutions out there, you know, just like the Journey song, there's always solutions. That came at the end of the Tron movie. There are only solutions. Also, in John Lennon's song, it says, "There's no problems, there's only solutions." And so the thing is that we can resolve things in the world. It doesn't require controlling people. John Lennon wasn't going around forcing people to abide by his perspective. He was inspiring and suggesting, which is what you should do as a Christian, not going around and voting for things and making people do certain stuff. Because there are people that have needs out there, and whether you see they're going to encroach on creating behaviors that are destructive, let it happen. Let them find out the error of their ways, because, I mean, you can tell them how you feel, and if they're your friends, they're going to respect you. If they're not your friends, they might consider it. It might lean on their ear, but it's not good for you to go out and force them, because if you force them, then they're not ever going to accept anything you have to say, because they're going to see you as evil. In their eyes, you're going to be evil. And so the only place I'm evil is in a game called Planet Side, and nobody's good. People are, from time to time, going to get outraged and slam something and yell, but don't take it out on others. You know, not unless they're taking it out on you. You know, you have to kind of defend yourself. You know, and if they won't accept your rebuke, then ignore them. you know, distance yourself, keep silent, keep silent if they're accessible. I mean, if you're accessible, keep silent. There was this boy on Mark Horvath's podcast, Invisible People, he was I think about 17, and he'd been on the streets since he was 9, and he said that you don't say anything bad of others because they know where you live and you have no security on the streets. So you don't speak evil of others. You don't spread gossip. You don't spread rumors. You will keep silent. You'll watch out for others. You know, and there are people that are in homeless tent cities that I've seen on Horvath's interviews. One guy that used to be he was a hotel. Um, what he did is he would go to hotels and he would um, determine. I think he was an evaluator of some sort, and he lost his job and he lost his home, and he ended up in a tent city. And tent cities operate kind of like how I describe communes, and communes are a commune is how heaven is defined. It's like it's where everybody serves each other and everybody's brother and sister. And you work, but you work without toil. You enjoy your work. You don't hurt in your body. It's like being forever fascinated and feeling have a sense of well-being always, not having the concerns for survival, not having uh, bodily needs, not having a need to thirst for water or to eat anything, not having any kind of homelessness. It's that's heaven. And doing something like that on earth, homelessness homeless people need security. And so what happens in these tent communities? They develop mutual trust, and it's as if everybody's a parent. Kind of like what you've heard of tribes where there will be children, but multiple mothers, and it isn't always the same mother taking care of the same child. They're all kind of tag teaming the responsibility. That's what happens in tent cities. And our government comes in with the police and they tear down these tent cities. There's a need for that in order to maintain a level of hygiene. But this guy said that it had been increasing and they'd been doing it much more than normal. Now, in some cities, like in Las Vegas, they're trying to, they're making it illegal. They're penalizing homeless people for being homeless. You know, and if you're concerned about abortion, I would be more concerned about things like that because if you prevent people from having abortions, they're going to get their baby aborted somewhere else. And if you prevent them from being aborted anywhere, to they're going to turn to people that will break the law in order to have abortions. And it will be an unclean method of aborting a baby. It'll be one that will give the mother hepatitis C. That's what Dr. Kevorkian had. And it may be that that's the solution is using a Kevorkian style death to the fetus that is beneficial to the baby in letting it die peacefully. But then you would add to that a ritual prayer, and you would you would let Christians come in and pray for it, and to give the mother something to think about, you know, after having done that. If I had a choice over what the law would be, it would be that women who had unprotected sex would not be able to abort their babies. They would have to go through the pregnancy. But those who were raped would have the choice because it was non consensual sex. And in that, there are going to be people who are going to have unprotected sex who didn't consent to having a baby, and they'll claim that they're raped, and then you'll have to go through the whole process of determining whether they're raped or they just weren't careful, you know. And they are not forced to keep the baby. The baby will this go to organizations that give children to parents that have a good history of behavior, haven't had any jail sentences, and they'll take on the baby. And you know, I also wouldn't look down upon teen pregnancies, because I know of a lady who had a teen pregnancy and it cut into her schooling, but she's a proud grandma. She has children. She's kind of not really well to do, but she's happy as hell. And I don't have any children, and I'm a little depressed. So it's all a matter of perspective. And um, I never necessarily could imagine having children. I could never imagine having somebody like me, that looks like me, and taking care of them. I've never been good at taking care of animals. It's because that I'm distracted, constantly distracted, and I'm always forgetting things that I'm supposed to do, you know. And so my schedules are ad hoc. And so it would be very easy for me to neglect an animal. So I don't see any point in maintaining raising animals. That doesn't make me an evil person. It just means that I'm not very good, that I'm willing to accept that I'm not very good at taking care of you know, animals and things and tending to them. I'm not very responsible. I admit it. Um, I'm not going to try to save face. I'm not going to. I told people, you know, they got porn addiction, and it's something that I find very hard to do without. Um, Mainly because even if you quit the porn, 3 months down the way, whenever you are abstaining, the pictures are still in your head. All it takes is seeing a woman in a certain way, and then all the pictures come back, and you have a wet dream, and then you're masturbating for several weeks because you don't see it being any different, because you already did something, you know, you already failed, you know. And that's just kind of how it goes, you know. You fall back into the addiction, and you know, you would claim that God was helping you through it, and it says that God can help you through those things. It may take a long time, take many years. For some people it'll be easy, some people it'll be very hard. And it really depends upon your situation. As I said, God is a wrestler. God will wrestle with you. And God will send you the devil to try to set you straight. But that doesn't mean that you're long gone. It's just a curse, you know. You be cursed, you know, you not be damned. God forgives. God's got grace, you know. God is really not wanting to stress you out. God wants you to live on. God wants you to make use of the skills you have. You know, there isn't no hard set rules, you know. And even though I have these visions of what I would want in a congregation, I'm not willing to start a congregation for the same reason that I'm not willing to have a family or raise children or even have animals. I'm just not very responsible. And so you just have to be true to yourself and say, this is what you are and this is what you do. And I'm good at giving all this ideas about the Bible. I don't know how many of them are true. Um, I look for rebuke. I accept rebuke. Hecklers don't give you rebuke. They just tell you you're wrong, and that doesn't mean anything. Until they give you rebuke, then them saying you're wrong is not really doing much. It's a very shallow way of if somebody says STFU, somebody says nobody cares, just keep in mind they didn't take a poll. There are people out there that do care. And those people that pop up, you've probably never seen them in your life. They could be very weak people that are being controlled by demons. And demons don't have any amount of depth to them. Only the devil does. The devil can come through somebody and say something that cuts right to the heart. But demons don't. Demons could be created instantly just to, they would be uh, like an application in a hypervisor that has no recollection of when it was created. It was like it was created yesterday. It could be a clone of an application that comes up running and does something and then is killed off instantly. Conjured up to do something and then let to go to waste back to the soil. And so hecklers come up and they heckle you and say nobody wants to hear that, but when they leave your presence, do they still exist? They probably don't. You'll never know the hecklers that exist on the internet. Only the ones that have a history that are accountable are the ones that probably matter. But the hecklers you don't know, they don't matter. You would never know them. So what significance is their word? Nothing. They're worth ignoring. Just ignore them. They're if these are people that hide behind avatars, and they use social engineering tactics. They use methods with words of controlling people, and they get a level of satisfaction from being able to have control over people. When people say somebody's a troll, in my mind, that is a root word. The root word of that is control. They desire to control other people. If you block them or ignore them by some functional mean of the application you're using, in PlanetSide 2, it's /ignore add name. You put it in there, they can't talk to you anymore, and they will continue to heckle you, but everybody knows that you've already ignored them. You've already run the command, and they get salty. They get upset, and then people pop up, and you'll continue to see messages saying, why so much hatred for such and such? And then it becomes kind of a source of embarrassed laughter. Um, they don't realize that people are laughing at them. And I'll even say to them, did you hear all those people that are not talking that are laughing at you right now? And then that makes them self-conscious and they stop heckling. So you can counter social engineer the social engineers, just as people counter scammers on the telephone. They call in, and then you just play the scammer by delaying them. And the more you delay them, the less they're going to be able to scam somebody else. It's a there's a piece of technology called a worm, and what a worm is it's not a virus. It is a application that utilizes resources so that nobody else has them. And if you've heard an internet worm, what that means is an application that's going around and taxing servers so that people can't use them. That's a strategy. In planet side, it would be going around mining all the Corsham mines so that no other ants could be using those Corsham mines. Um, or going and taking a flag so that all these people that would be elsewhere fighting against your forces are now um, wasting all their time trying to find the cloaker that's taking the flag back. It's a strategy, and so it can be used for bad. It can be used for good. It's a tool. It's like technology. Anyhow, I think I'm going to